Every year, over 600,000 people are reported missing in the United States alone. Most come home. Most have explanations. But some cases leave behind something worse than answers. They leave behind witnesses, people who saw something or someone they were never supposed to see. Tonight, 3 men share what they experienced. 3 cases, 3 moments that changed everything they thought they knew about the people around them. My name is not important. What matters is that these stories are real, and after you hear them, you may never look at a stranger the same way again. I was 24 years old, and I was driving home from a job interview in Nashville. It was a 7-hour drive back to my parents' place in Virginia. I wasn't tired yet. I had a full cup of gas station coffee and a playlist going, but my back was tight and I needed to stretch. I pulled off at one of those state-run rest stops on I-81, the kind with the brick building and the vending machines and the little walking trail around a patch of grass. I'd stopped there once before with my dad when I was a kid. It felt familiar, safe. I parked under a light, grabbed my phone, and went inside to use the restroom. The rest stop was almost empty, one semi-truck idling at the far end of the lot, a minivan near the entrance, hazard lights blinking slow. The fluorescent lights inside the brick building hummed in that particular frequency that makes your teeth feel wrong. The men's room was at the end of a short corridor. The whole place smelled like industrial cleaner and old concrete. There was a cork board near the entrance with park maps and tourism flyers pinned to it. One flyer had a photo of a missing girl, 17 years old, brown hair, last seen 6 months ago, 2 exits south of here. I remember reading it because I remember thinking, who posts these things and how long before anyone notices they've been there too long? When I came back out of the restroom, there was a man standing at the corkboard. I hadn't heard him come in. He was maybe 50, thin, wearing a grey windbreaker, hands in his pockets. He was staring at the missing girl's flyer, not reading it, staring at it, the way you stare at something you already know. I told myself, he was probably a concerned parent, probably some local, who stopped here every week and checked for updates. But then I noticed his shoes, canvas sneakers, no socks, and the cuffs of his jeans were damp, dark with water, even though it hadn't rained in 2 days. I walked past him toward the exit. He didn't move. He didn't turn. He just kept staring at the flyer. Still, not blinking. Still. I got back to my car and sat down. I told myself I was being paranoid. I pulled up my playlist and scrolled for a few seconds, not really seeing it. Then I looked up at the building. He was standing outside now, at the edge of the lit walkway, looking at the parking lot. I couldn't tell if he was looking at me specifically. The light behind him made it hard, but he was facing my direction and he hadn't moved. I started my car. He took 3 steps forward, not toward me, just toward the lot in general, but 3 steps even, measured. I put the car in reverse and he stopped. He just stopped and watched me back out. I drove to the exit. I checked my mirror. He was walking now, toward the far end of the lot, toward the semi-truck that was idling. He walked up to the driver's side and knocked twice on the door. Slow, deliberate, like he'd done it before. The truck didn't move. I got on the highway. I drove 4 miles before I pulled over and sat there with my hands shaking on the wheel. And I couldn't tell you why, except that something in me knew. Something animal and pre-verbal just knew that I had been looked at and measured and found acceptable or unacceptable, and that either answer was wrong. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I stared at it for a long time. I didn't answer. It buzzed again. And then a third time. I turned the phone face down. When I finally looked at it again, there were no missed calls. No record of any incoming calls at all. I drove the rest of the way without stopping. 5 hours straight. My back screamed for the last 2. I didn't care. I got home at 3:40 a.m. and sat in my parents' driveway for 10 minutes before I went inside. My dad was awake. He'd waited up. I told him I was fine. I made myself coffee I didn't drink. I sat at the kitchen table until the sun came up. 3 weeks later, I was back in Nashville for the second interview round. I drove during the day and took a different route. But before I left, I looked up that rest stop. I'd remembered the exit number. I searched the area in local news archives. What I found was a 2019 article from a small Tennessee paper. A semi-truck driver had reported a man matching that description. The driver said no. Said the man walked off into the dark past the tree line at the edge of the property and never came back to the lot. The driver called it in because the whole thing felt wrong. Police checked the tree line. They found a woman's shoe. One shoe. No woman. The case was listed as an unresolved welfare check. It's still open. That was 2 years ago. I still drive during the day now, if I can help it. I don't stop at rest stops after dark. Sometimes I think about that corkboard, that flyer, the way he was looking at it. And I wonder if he knew her. I wonder which direction that would be worse. I moved into the house on Creston Avenue when I was 28. Nice street, quiet, the kind of neighborhood where people wave at you from their driveways. My neighbor across the street was a man named Gerald. Mid-60s, retired, spent most of his time in the garden. He had a daughter who visited on weekends. I never got her name. She drove a blue Civic, always parked in the same spot, always left by Sunday evening. I noticed her the way you notice recurring things in a routine, like the mail truck or the neighbor's sprinklers. She was just part of the pattern of the street. Then one Sunday, she didn't leave. I noticed the Civic was still there. Monday morning, still there. Monday night, still there Tuesday. Gerald came out Tuesday morning and got the mail. Same as always, went back inside. The blinds in the house were closed. All of them, even the ones that were usually open. The garden, which Gerald tended every single day, went untouched. The lawn chairs he always had out were folded up against the wall. The house felt sealed, like it was holding its breath. Wednesday evening, I saw her. Or I thought I did. I looked up from my desk, and there was a figure in Gerald's upstairs window. Just for a second, then the curtain dropped. Straight down, like something pulling it from below. I told myself it was the light. I told myself I was tired. I checked the window again. The curtain was still, not blinking. Still, Thursday morning, there was a smell. Faint, sweet and chemical and wrong. I went outside and stood on my porch. It was coming from across the street, not strong, just present. I knocked on Gerald's door. I told myself I was just checking in. Neighborly thing to do. He answered immediately, like he was already standing at the door. But his hands, both hands flat against the door frame, one on each side, filling the gap, not blocking it consciously, just there, like a habit. I said, "Day, tell her I hope she feels better." He said, "I will. She appreciates it." He closed the door. Through the door, I heard nothing. Not a television, not movement, not the particular silence of a house where someone is sleeping. A different kind of silence. Packed. Full. I walked back to my house and called the non-emergency police line. 2 hours later, a patrol car pulled up. I watched from my window. The officer knocked. Gerald answered. They talked for 4 minutes. The officer left. I asked if they went inside. There was a pause. Then, the resident confirmed everyone in the home is fine. That was the whole answer. The Civic was gone. Friday morning, I watched Gerald come out and water the garden like nothing. He waved at me. I waved back. But I photographed the Civic's license plate the week before. I don't know why. Instinct. And I kept the photo. 8 months later, I was talking to a woman 2 doors down, Linda, who'd lived on the street for decades. I mentioned Gerald's daughter casually. Linda got quiet. She said she didn't know Gerald had a daughter. Said she'd known him for 12 years and never once saw a family member visit. I pulled up the plate photo that night. I ran it through one of those lookup services. The Civic was registered to a 26-year-old woman in Columbus. She had been reported missing by her roommate approximately 4 months before I ever saw her car on my street. The case was still open. I forwarded the plate and the address to the Columbus PD tip line. I never heard back. I moved out of that house 6 months later. I've never driven down Creston Avenue again. Gerald still lives there. I looked it up recently. The house is still in his name, still occupied. Sometimes I think about the officer who knocked on that door, who accepted a 2-sentence answer and got back in his car. And I think about what was on the other side of that door. Whatever silence I heard through it, that sound, that packed, full silence, I hear it sometimes when my own house gets too quiet at night, and I get up and I check the locks, every single one. I want to start by saying I'm not a dramatic person. I'm an accountant. I coach my son's little league team. I drive a sensible car, and I go to bed before 10. I tell you this because what I'm about to describe is not the kind of thing I ever expected to have a story about. I'm 38 years old, and until the summer, I turned 35. The worst thing that had ever happened to me was a fender bender in a Costco parking lot. I'm saying this so you understand that when I tell you I am still not fully okay, I need you to understand what that means for someone like me. We were camping, me, my brother-in-law Rob, and 2 guys from our old college group, Tom and a man we all called Fitz. 4 guys, late 30s, a long weekend at a campground on the Boundary Waters in northern Minnesota. We'd done it twice before. Same campground, same site, same routine. Canoe out, fish, drink beer, sit around the fire. It was a Thursday night. We'd been there 2 days. The campground had maybe 8 or 9 other sites, most of them empty by mid-August. The lake was dark and flat, and so still at night it looked like a photograph. Sound traveled strange over water. You could hear a conversation from across the lake as a murmur, not words, just human frequency. The tree line was thick on the far shore. No lights over there. Just black shapes against a slightly less black sky. There were loons calling most nights. That sound, if you've never heard it, is one of the loneliest sounds in the world. Beautiful and lonely at the same time. That Thursday night, the loons were quiet. Fitz was the one who saw it first. He'd gone down to the water's edge around 11 p.m. to rinse his cup. He came back to the fire and said quietly that there was something in the water across the lake. He said it looked like a person floating. We all told him he'd had too many beers. He said he was serious. Rob and I took our flashlights down to the shore. I shone mine across. You couldn't reach the far bank, obviously. It was maybe 300 meters. But in the portion of the lake I could see, the water was flat. Nothing. I told myself Fitz had seen a log, a reflection, the shape a wave makes when there's no wind. I told myself I believed that. At 1 a.m. I woke up, not gradually. Suddenly, the way you wake up when a sound stops rather than starts. The loons had been calling. They stopped. That was what woke me. I unzipped my tent. The fire was down to coals. Rob was asleep in his tent. I could hear Fitz snoring. Tom's tent was zipped. The lake was visible from where I stood. A flat black mirror, and in the middle of it, maybe 100 meters out, was a shape. Vertical, not floating, standing. The water at that point is 15 feet deep. 15 feet deep, and something was standing in it, with what appeared to be its head and shoulders above the waterline. I stood there for a long time. I didn't call out. I didn't wake anyone. I just stood there and watched it. It didn't move. For 20 minutes, it didn't move. Then it turned. Slowly, the way a buoy turns in a current. And it was facing me. I'm not able to tell you what I saw. Not because I didn't see it, because I did. Because I stood there in the dark for 20 minutes and I looked at it. I don't talk about that part. What I will tell you is that I made a sound I have never made before or since. Something between a word and not a word. And I turned around and I woke up all three men and I told them to pack. We packed in the dark. We loaded the cars. We left at 2 a.m. and drove 2 hours to the nearest motel, and I sat in the shower until the hot water ran out. Nobody argued with me. That's what I remember most. Rob, who makes a joke out of everything, didn't make a joke. Tom, who questions everything, didn't question anything. Fitz, who had seen something too earlier and been laughed at, just started rolling up his sleeping bag when I told him. We didn't talk during the drive. We didn't talk at the motel. We got breakfast at a diner at 6 a.m. And we talked about football. We checked out and drove home. We never went back. 6 months later, Tom called me. He said he'd been looking at news archives from that area, hadn't been able to stop himself. He found 3 things. First, a man had gone missing from a fishing boat on that lake in 2017. His boat was found drifting, empty, motor still running. He was never found. Second, a Parks Department report from 2019 cited unusual acoustic phenomena at that campground and recommended against solo camping there without further explanation. Third, and this is the one that ended the conversation, there was a local news story from 2021, 1 year before our trip, about a kayaker who had reported seeing a figure standing in the middle of the lake. The kayaker said it appeared to be looking at him. He paddled to shore and called the county sheriff. Deputies found nothing. But the article included a quote from the kayaker describing what the figure looked like. It matched what I saw. Word for word, it matched what I saw. And I had never told Tom. I'd never told anyone. That was 3 years ago. I still camp. I have a son and he loves it, and I'm not gonna let this take that from him. But I choose the sites carefully now. I study the history. I check the depth charts, and I never, ever camp near standing water when there's no moon. The world gets very small and very dark without moonlight. Sounds travel too far, shapes hold too long. And some things, whatever they are, wherever they come from, they know when you're looking. They feel the attention and they turn.